take a second with me and let's just think about what your fantasy team could look like today if you had stashed high upside players instead of waiting each new week to bid against the waiver wire hotness against your league mates. Well, in today's video, I am bringing you 10 plus names that you need to stash. We are going to try and beat the breakout. Here's some names that should already be rostered. By the way, every single one of these names we have discussed in detail on this video series this week. You can go back and check my work if you want to, but all these names should already be rostered without a doubt. They're helping people win weeks right now in their starting lineups. So before we get into my top 10, I just want to repeat some information that I brought to you guys last week because I think it is so crucial. As we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, you need to think about your fantasy team with a little bit more intention. Let me take you quickly back to the year 2021. It was week 16 of the fantasy playoffs in my home league, and my opponent had Austin Eckler, but Eckler had an injury and wasn't able to play that week. I, on the other hand, playing the guy who had Austin Eckler, was able to pick up Eckler's handcuff, which was Justin Jackson at the time, and his handcuff I picked up. I played him against the guy who had Eckler, and Justin Jackson put up 34 PPR points for me, meaning that was a 68-point swing in favor of myself in that matchup. Justin Jackson, that pickup was a huge reason why I went on to win the fantasy championship in my home league that year. So my number one point, and probably the most important thing you should do with the waiver wire right now, is to handcuff your star running backs. The absolute worst thing that could happen for you is you decide to pick up someone that you have no intention of playing, and then your star running back goes down, and you have to bid against the people you're playing against in the playoffs to get the handcuff. So think about it this way. Would you rather stash a name that you might start at some point, or now get some security? That way, if anything were to happen, you are already, having your bases covered. So if you have Christian McCaffrey, go get Elijah Mitchell. He would be the starter in my opinion. If you have Travis Etienne, go grab Tank Bigsby. Yes, Tank Bigsby hasn't played that well, but he's still someone they spent a day 2 pick on. If Travis Etienne went down, we know how important the running back position is in this Jags offense. If Jonathan Taylor went down, Zach Moss, we've already seen the upside. If Derrick Henry went down, Tajay Spears would be a top 24 play that week instantly. If Ken Walker went down, we know what Charbonnet would do. Bijan Robinson with Tyler Algier. I know someone commented last week saying, unfortunately, Bijan is a handcuff, but he played incredibly this week. He's back on track. But look at the rest of these names. The point is, what you want to do is to handcuff your superstar now, because you do not want to be in a position where if your star running back goes down, you have got to spend as much fab as you have left to kind of cover your bases. I know it seems silly, but trust me, I am saving future you by telling you to handcuff your running backs at this very point. All right, let's get on to the rest of the top 10. Number 2, in case these guys are not rostered, by the way, guys, we're going to have something for everyone. If you're in a smaller league or if you're in a larger league, there will be something for every single person in today's video. But I just wanted to quickly cover my bases. Keaton Mitchell and Ty Chandler. These are the hottest waiver wire pickup names of week 11. I just want to quickly mention that if they're available, they absolutely should be prioritized. Keaton is rostered in 23% of ESPN leagues and under 50% of sleeper leagues. Meanwhile, Ty Chandler rostered in just 3% of ESPN leagues and 16% of sleeper leagues. With Keaton Mitchell, he has been explosive in limited opportunities. Now, he hasn't been involved the way that we have wanted him to be so far. Last week, just 3 carries on the ground. However, John Harbaugh has mentioned this week that they want to get him more and more touches. And Harbaugh has an 80% reliability rating on usage/workload coach speak, according to the Coach Speak Index, which is actually a fantastic Twitter account you guys can go follow if you want to. Definitely, if Keaton Mitchell is available, even if you're in like a 10-man league, he should be rostered at this point. As far as Ty Chandler goes, we brought him on this very video series last week as a stash after the Cam Akers injury. Madison last week left the game with a concussion, and at the moment, I don't expect him to play. So if Ty Chandler is available, He definitely showed some juice out there with his opportunities. He got into the end zone. And now without Madison, he has a real opportunity to kind of carve out a role for himself if he balls out in this next game. Okay, the number 3 stash for me this week, a player we've discussed before, but still available in 36% of, only rostered in 36% of ESPN leagues. That is Pat Freiermuth, or as we call him here, Pat the Dragon. So he's available in a high percentage of leagues. There's no way around it. Pat has not been good this year for fantasy football. I mean, he hasn't had more than 4 targets in a single game this year. He's been dealing with injuries in and out. However, I still believe he is a crucial part of this offense. You saw the offense get a little bit better when Deontay Johnson came back. They are still missing their stud franchise tight end in Pat Freiermuth. We know the connection that he's had with Kenny Pickett in his career. And don't forget what Pat Freiermuth has done in his career so far. As a rookie, he finished as a tight end 13. That's very impressive in fantasy football. I know this is a great rookie class, but that is kind of not normal to see that. And in 2022, he finished as the tight end 7 in fantasy football. Most of us had expectations coming into the year of Pat Freiermuth finishing top 12. And with him probably coming off the IR this week, this is your last chance to kind of go grab some Pat Freiermuth to see what he's going to do for your rosters. All right, the number 4 player is Michael Wilson. You guys know I love Michael Wilson, but he's still not rostered in a high percentage of leagues, so I need to tell you about him. Only rostered in 6% of ESPN leagues and 20% of sleeper leagues. Wilson has been very, very good in limited opportunities. He had his breakout game in week 4 versus San Francisco, 26 fantasy points. And since that game, he's averaged over 84% of the snaps and averaged 5.7 targets per game in the last 3 contests. Now we have Kyler Murray back. Y'all know how much I love Kyler Murray if you've been watching the channel. I love Kyler Murray. He looked very good last week. Did not look hindered by his ACL injury at all. He was a little rusty, but he's starting to kind of shake that rust off. And the good news is he was targeting Wilson quite often. Wilson finished with 6 targets that game, more than Hollywood Brown. Well, let's go ahead and look for Kyler and Michael Wilson to kind of build their chemistry over the next coming weeks. Michael Wilson is someone that I am actively adding. Already have him on some teams and expecting a potential late breakout from him. All right, number 5, Rondale Moore, his teammate. Rondale Moore is currently rostered in 33% of ESPN leagues and 19% of sleeper leagues. I prefer Michael Wilson long term, but to be fair, Rondale was the highest targeted wide receiver on the team. He just didn't see the snaps or the routes run that these other guys did because he's kind of limited as far as like a 12 personnel option. He's not really out there in those sort of schemes and formats. So just keep in mind, Rondale Moore is a limited player, but when he's out there right now, Kyler Murray is targeting him. So this is like 14, 16-man league. If you need a flex option, Rondale could be a serious contender. All right, number 6, a newcomer to the video series. That is A.T. Perry with the New Orleans Saints. He's rostered in less than 2% of platforms everywhere. Michael Thomas was injured last week, and the reports are that he suffered a fairly significant knee injury. To me, that indicates that Michael Thomas will likely not be available for a long period of time. So A.T. Perry has a good chance, a good time frame here to kind of build a role for himself. A young, big body, talented wide receiver, a rookie that they just drafted, has a chance to develop a role for himself. And last week, he led all Saints players in snaps, routes run, and he ended up scoring a touchdown when Jameis Winston came into the game. So we could see this big body, ex-alpha type profile kind of develop a nice role in New Orleans without Michael Thomas taking snaps away. All right, are you looking for a tight end? Diving deep into the tight end position, let's talk about Tanner Hudson. Rostered in less than 1% across all platforms everywhere. And it makes sense because Tanner Hudson's kind of coming out of nowhere. He's slowly, though, developing a really nice role for himself in the Bengals offense, and he's doing it on limited snaps. Back-to-back weeks now, with at least 5 targets, 7 targets last week versus the Houston Texans. And by the way, he's averaging a target on 41% of his routes run, meanwhile, Irv Smith, the other tight end here, that's a receiver, is only seeing a target on 7% of his routes run. So they are making it obvious that when Tanner Hudson is in the game, they want to get him more involved. And if you think about it, this is what this offense has been missing for so long, an impact receiving tight end. They've talked about how much they love him, and they're starting to get him more and more involved. Tanner Hudson should be rostered at this point in any deeper formats. All right, at number 8, let's talk about Kyle Phillips. If you've been with us over on the Dynasty channel, you know that I really liked Kyle Phillips coming out of UCLA. He just hasn't been healthy, hasn't had a chance to really prove himself, but he is a great slot wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans, rostered in less than 1% of ESPN leagues and 3% of sleeper leagues. But you can see now we have 3 weeks in a row where he is getting serious production. In the past 2 weeks, 5 targets in each of those games and over 60 yards. Now, this obviously, the time span I'm showing you here is coinciding with the fact that Will Levis is now the quarterback. So we're seeing Will Levis kind of finding, his favorite targets. And it makes sense because Will Levis would have been practicing with the second stringers while Ryan Tannehill was practicing with the starters. And Kyle Phillips would have already built some chemistry with Will Levis. So definitely someone that I would be looking at rostering if you're in a deeper format or even in a dynasty league. These last 2 guys, Tanner Hudson and Kyle Phillips, I promise you they're available in some dynasty leagues out there. All right, number 9, let's talk about Rico Dowdle, rostered in less than 4% of ESPN leagues and 6% of sleeper leagues. The reason we are rostering Rico is because he is showing some serious juice in this offense, and I think there's a chance that he could develop a larger role for himself in the coming weeks. Last week versus the Giants, in garbage time, he ended up with 79 rushing yards, averaging over 6.5 yards per carry, and he ended up in the end zone. Between him and Pollard, really Rico fits more the Zeke Elliott goal line role than Tony Pollard, and we're seeing the Cowboys just not having any interest in allowing Tony Pollard to get a rushing touchdown recently. So maybe, based off his performance last week, we could see Rico Dowdle kind of build a larger role for himself in the coming weeks. And the last player I'm going to talk about today is a wide receiver that, if he gets healthy, he can instantly go into your starting lineup as a flex option in any 12-man league. That is Zay Jones, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, rostered in less than 22% of ESPN leagues and less than 30% of sleeper leagues. What I'm showing you now on the screen is the 3 games where Zay Jones has been active for this team. In week 1, he played 89% of the snaps. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 55 yards and a touchdown. In week 2, he had 6 targets, none of them connected. That was just a rough week for that Jags offense. And in week 5, he only played 43% of the snaps. He still had 5 targets and ended up with a touchdown. 2 of 3 games so far this year when Zay Jones has been healthy and available, he has scored a touchdown for the Jags. And as weird as it sounds, you can see this offense really missing Zay Jones right now. He's kind of the glue guy. He's this reliable target for Trevor Lawrence. He's kind of the touchdown earner in this offense, as crazy as that sounds. But Zay Jones, I know he's dealing with some legal issues. He cut bail, earlier this week. And maybe if he gets back out there and he finally gets healthy, not even maybe, like genuinely in a 12 or 14-man league, if Zay Jones gets healthy and he starts for this team, instantly I'm starting him. He's instantly a flex option, depending on your option. So that is it for today, guys. Really appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, go ahead and hit the like button to show some love. I think there's something for everyone here in today's video, larger and smaller leagues. And if you have a stash that you love, go ahead and comment it down below, and people can kind of scroll through the comments and see any advice that you guys have out there for them. But definitely make sure you're handcuffing your star running backs. And the last thing I'll say is if you want to show us some support over here on the channel, then go ahead and sign up to the Flock Fantasy website with our promo code LAND. Our code will get you 30% off your membership. It will also give you access to my weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings, articles from the best minds in the industry, and a bunch more. So go ahead, use our promo code, check out the description, DM us if you do, we'll get you all hooked up We appreciate you. Let's go stash some high upside players and beat the breakout together. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.